Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. It's time for this week's video. Get ready. So, a few days ago, a gospel revolutionary called me, and he asked me to explain what we talk about when we talk about personal responsibility in the light of the gospel. Basically, when a person who has been taught the way we were taught in Christianity about responsibility versus our obligations and being in the will of God and things like that, we actually surrender our own responsibility, or we don't believe we are allowed to have our own responsibility. We just have to be obedient. And what that leads to is people will marry the wrong person because they believe that's the person God wants them to marry. They will go into the wrong vocation because they think that's what God wants them to do. They will make decisions in their lives based on what they think is God's will for them, and a lot of times through counsel from pastors and church people and things like that. And so they don't take any responsibility for making that decision themselves. So in the end, they really don't have or take personal responsibility for their lives. So when that happens, it can lead to a lot of bad decisions. And then, but when a person who has been taught that way then comes to understand the gospel, they realize that they can take responsibility for their own lives, because God never was giving them signs or telling them to do this or that or the other. I know of pastors who they hated being pastors, but they thought that's what God wanted them to do. And when they realized they had responsibility for their own life and God wasn't making the decisions for them, they left the ministry. People have told me about how, several people have told me how they married the wrong person and the marriage was horrible and it ended badly. And when they came to understand the gospel and they could take responsibility for their own lives, they knew they could make better choices for a person they want to be with versus or not be with, and not just out of what they thought was obedience marry the person they thought God wanted them to marry. So personal responsibility is huge, but it's also the freedom of the gospel. You're actually free to make your own choices. Word of Faith and Pentecostalism and even Baptists, they use the whole cursings and blessings things with responsibility. They will say, if something bad happens to you, a random thing happens to you, they will say it's because you left the door open for the devil, or there's sin in your life, whatever. That just puts the responsibility on you for having been disobedient in some way, when actually that wasn't your fault. I also remember when somebody accomplished something and they had a very great accomplishment, something they could be proud of, they were very strict in Word of Faith and Pentecostal type religions and other denominations, where you always had to thank God for that and give God the praise for that, instead of have a natural and good sense of accomplishment and confidence in yourself. So responsibility, personal responsibility in the freedom of the gospel is true freedom. It is not distorted like religious indoctrination distorts it. And it is true freedom. It's revolutionary. I know. Have a revolutionary week.